In early October 2023, a war started between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is a group that controls Gaza. They fired rockets into Israel, attacked Israeli cities, and took hostages. Israel was surprised by this attack and quickly fought back. A day after the attack on October 7th, Israel officially declared war on Hamas. They told their defense forces to completely surround Gaza. Since then, both sides have been firing rockets at each other. Israel also told over 1 million Palestinian people in northern Gaza to leave because they might send troops there. At the same time, Gaza is running out of water, fuel, and supplies because Israel is stopping aid from getting in. The conflict is making things worse in other places too, like Lebanon and Syria. In 1947, the United Nations made a plan to split the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. On May 14, 1948, Israel was formed, which led to the first war between Arabs and Israel. The war ended in 1949 with Israel winning, but it left 750,000 Palestinians without homes, and the land was divided into three parts: Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. After that, there were more problems between Israel and its neighbors, like Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. In 1956, after the Suez Crisis and Israel's invasion of the Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria made pacts to help each other in case of war with Israel. In June 1967, Israel attacked Egypt and Syria because they thought there might be a war. This began the Six-Day War. After the war, Israel controlled the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. 6 years later, in the Yom Kippur War or the October War, Egypt and Syria surprised Israel with a two-front attack to get back their lost land. But the war didn't give anyone big advantages. However, Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat called it a win for Egypt because it allowed Egypt and Syria to talk about the land they lost. Finally, in 1979, after many ceasefires and peace talks, Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords, which was a peace treaty that ended a 30-year fight between them. Even though the Camp David Accords made things better between Israel and its neighbors, the issue of Palestinian self-rule was still not solved. In 1987, many Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip rebelled against the Israeli government, and this was called the First Intifada. In 1993, the Oslo I Accords helped to calm the conflict. They made a plan for Palestinians to govern themselves in the West Bank and Gaza. They also made both the Palestinian Authority and Israel's government recognize each other. In 1995, the Oslo II Accords added more details to the first agreement. It said that Israel had to completely leave 6 cities and 450 towns in the West Bank. In 2000, because of problems like Israel controlling the West Bank, the peace talks not moving forward, and Ariel Sharon, former Israeli Prime Minister, visiting a holy site for Muslims in 2000, Palestinians started the Second Intifada, which went on until 2005. In response, Israel built a wall around the West Bank in 2002, even though many people, including the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, were against it. Factionalism among the Palestinians became a problem when Hamas won the Palestinian Authority's parliamentary elections in 2006, removing the longtime leading party, Fatah. This victory gave Hamas control of the Gaza Strip, a small piece of land on the Mediterranean Sea bordering Egypt to the south. The United States, the European Union, and others did not accept Hamas' electoral win because Western governments had labeled it a terrorist organization since the late 1990s. After Hamas took control, conflicts broke out between them and Fatah. From 2006 to 2011, a series of unsuccessful peace talks and violent clashes eventually led to an agreement to work together. In 2014, Fatah entered into a unity government with Hamas. In the summer of 2014, tensions in the Palestinian territories led to a military clash between the Israeli military and Hamas. During this conflict, Hamas fired nearly 3,000 rockets at Israel, and Israel responded with a major offensive in Gaza. The fighting ended in late August 2014 through a ceasefire brokered by Egypt, but not before causing the loss of many lives, with 73 Israelis and 2,251 Palestinians killed. After a wave of violence between Israelis and Palestinians in 2015, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of Fatah declared that Palestinians would no longer follow the territorial divisions established by the Oslo Accords. In 2018, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip held weekly demonstrations at the border with Israel. The last protest coincided with the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, which marked the Palestinian exodus during Israel's independence. While most protesters were peaceful, some breached the border fence and engaged in confrontations. According to the United Nations, 183 demonstrators were killed, and over 6,000 were injured by live ammunition. The ongoing political tensions led to a continued division between Fatah, which controlled the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and Hamas, which effectively governed the Gaza Strip. This division persisted through the late 2010s and early 2020s, despite Mahmoud Abbas' efforts to unify the Palestinian people under the Palestinian Authority. In May 2018, there was another round of fighting between Hamas and the IDF, marking the most intense violence since 2014. Before a ceasefire was reached, Gaza militants launched over 100 rockets into Israel, and Israel responded with strikes on more than 50 targets in Gaza during a 24-hour clash. The Trump administration made achieving an Israeli-Palestinian deal a foreign policy priority. In 2018, they stopped funding for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which helps Palestinian refugees, and moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, overturning a long-standing U.S. policy. Israel claims Jerusalem as its capital, while Palestinians want East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. In January 2020, the Trump administration unveiled its Peace to Prosperity plan, which Palestinians rejected because it supported Israel's annexation of settlements in the West Bank and control over an undivided Jerusalem. In August and September 2020, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain normalized relations with Israel, becoming only the third and fourth countries in the region to do so, following Egypt and Jordan. These agreements were called the Abraham Accords, but Palestinian leaders, including Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas, rejected them. In October 2020, an Israeli court ruled that several Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah, a neighborhood in East Jerusalem, would be evicted by May 2021, with their land going to Jewish families. In February 2021, some of the Palestinian families filed an appeal against this ruling, leading to protests, ongoing legal battles over property ownership, and the displacement of Palestinians from their homes in Jerusalem. In late April 2021, Palestinians in Jerusalem started protesting against planned evictions. They were joined by people from Sheikh Jarrah and other activists who held nightly sit-ins. In early May, a court ruled in favor of the evictions, and protests grew. Israeli police used force against the demonstrators. On May 7, violence erupted at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Israeli police used stun grenades, rubber bullets, and water cannons, leaving hundreds of Palestinians injured. Tensions rose in East Jerusalem, especially during Jerusalem Day celebrations. On May 10, after several days of violence and use of force by Israeli police, Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups fired many rockets into Israel. In response, Israel launched artillery bombardments and airstrikes, targeting Hamas and other militants, along with their infrastructure, like tunnels and rocket launchers. They also hit non-military places such as residential buildings, media offices, and healthcare facilities. On May 21, 2021, Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire, mediated by Egypt. Both sides claimed victory. During the 11 days of fighting, over 250 Palestinians were killed, nearly 2,000 were wounded, and at least 13 Israelis lost their lives. Gaza authorities estimated millions of dollars in damages. And the United Nations said over 72,000 Palestinians were displaced due to the conflict. President Joe Biden showed strong support for Israel when the war between Israel and Hamas began on October 7, 2023. The United States announced it would send arms and move its warships in the Mediterranean Sea closer to Israel. The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting but couldn't agree on a statement. There were concerns about the safety of civilians in both Israel and the Palestinian territories, as well as those held hostage by militants in Gaza. In the first 2 days of fighting, approximately 800 Israelis and 500 Palestinians lost their lives, which is a major concern. While the United States didn't immediately confirm reports of direct Iranian involvement in Hamas' attack on October 7, Iran has a well-established relationship with Hamas and other extremist groups in the Middle East. There were worries that these attacks could signal Iran's intent to expand its influence in the region. Experts also expressed concern that Hezbollah, another extremist group with Iranian backing, could become involved, potentially broadening the conflict. On October 9, there were reports of Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, firing at targets in Lebanon, where Hezbollah is based, although the purpose of this operation was not clear. In 2023, the United States' effort to broker a normalization agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia was disrupted by the October conflict. Saudi Arabia has historically advocated for the rights and safety of Palestinian Arab populations in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. With IDF operations now taking place in Gaza, it jeopardized the progress made in reaching a common understanding between Israelis and Saudis. In late December 2022, a new government led by Benjamin Netanyahu and his Likud party was formed in Israel. This government is considered one of the most far-right and religious in Israel's history. It includes several far-right and religious parties, and Netanyahu had to make concessions to gain their support. The government has faced criticism for prioritizing the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank and for endorsing discrimination against LGBTQ+ individuals for religious reasons. In May 2023, they also voted to limit judicial oversight of the government after nationwide protests in March. Throughout 2022 and the first 9 months of 2023, there was a significant increase in violence between Israelis and Palestinians. The West Bank experienced ongoing clashes, including frequent Israeli military operations. Israel approved the construction of 5,000 new settler homes in June 2023, which many experts and international institutions consider illegal under international law. The Israeli military conducted various operations, including incursions into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, airstrikes, and missile attacks. In May 2023, there was a 5-day conflict between Israel and Gazan militants, resulting in numerous missile launches. In July, Israel deployed troops and carried out a large-scale raid in the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank, leading to casualties. This incursion was followed by an attack by Hamas in Tel Aviv and missile launches towards Israel. The October 2023 conflict between Israel and Hamas is one of the most significant escalations in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in several decades.